Perhaps the hardest question in golf to answer is this. Is my current swing good enough to reach my scoring goals, or do I have to make a change? That's likely why so many of you are constantly on the search for that elusive fix. In this video, I'm going to help you make that decision, explain best practices when going through a swing change, how to work effectively with an instructor if you choose to go that route, and last but not least, an alternate method where you don't touch your golf swing, but still find a way to get better. Hi, my name is Jon Sherman and I'm the author of the best-selling book, The 4 Foundations of Golf. On this channel, I am giving you no-nonsense, actionable advice on how to become a better golfer. Okay, so for all of you who constantly wonder if you should make a swing change, here's how I like to answer that question. You need to think about what you stand to gain and what you stand to lose. There are no guarantees with swing changes. You've heard stories at the professional level of it ruining some players' careers, or it could be the final piece of the puzzle to win a major championship. But for you watching this, you just want to win more of your friend's money on a Saturday morning round. So the stakes are high, but not quite that high. Let me tell you a quick personal story about how a major swing overhaul literally changed the trajectory of my life and allowed me to realize 2 childhood dreams of starting my own business and becoming a better golfer. I know that sounds a little dramatic, but it's actually true. Back in 2011, I was living in New York City and I really didn't have the opportunity to play much golf. While I was a decent junior player, the framework of my golf swing had totally fallen apart at that point, and I was genuinely clueless. I was trying something different each time I got the chance to play or practice. So I decided to get some lessons from a respected instructor. He felt the best matchup for me was to come from the inside more and hit a draw. At first, it was really uncomfortable, and it took a lot of practice sessions for it to click. But I felt this newfound freedom of actually being able to release the club head. I was hitting it farther and with more accuracy. Honestly, I felt it was the way I should always have been swinging. I did notice improvement in scoring within a few months, and eventually when I moved out of the city and could play more golf, this swing framework allowed me to get down to a 2-3 handicap level and eventually scratch. That inspired me to start writing about golf improvement in 2015 and share all the other things I had figured out along the way. 10 years later, I have my own business and the thing I love doing the most, golf, and I'm playing at a level I could only dream of as a kid. This game wasn't always easy for me, and it's still not. So I can legitimately tell you that without this swing overhaul, none of this would have been possible. Now, obviously this worked out really well, but the main reason I was willing to do it was because I really had nothing to lose and everything to gain at that point. I had no clue where my golf ball was going. I had no idea what to work on while I practiced, and I just felt there was going to be a ton of upside. But fast forward 12 or 13 years later, I would never dream of doing a swing overhaul right now. While I've made tons of what I would call minor changes in my swing through the years through skill-based practice, I've not once gotten technical instruction since then. So I feel like my swing is a bit of a fully baked potato at this point, and I have a lot of trust in it. Yes, it can be a little funky at times and I wish it looked prettier, but I've played hundreds of tournament rounds and had some really nice results, and I feel abandoning the framework at this point just isn't worth it to me. I think I'd have more to lose than I stand to gain. And this is the educated guess that on some level, all golfers have to make in deciding whether or not they should materially change their golf swing. Golf is literally one big gray area, and we need to make calculated decisions in the face of uncertainty. Sounds like this other thing called life. So each of you need to take a hard look at your game, and if you feel like genuinely you don't have a path forward and watching 200 YouTube videos on your golf swing isn't fixing things, then it might be a good idea to ask for help. Now let's say you do want to make a swing change. I'm going to walk you through all of the key points I think you should know to set yourself up for success. I'll simplify this as best I can, but the reality, of course, is always messier in golf. The first thing you have to consider is relevancy. You need to understand the impact fundamentals that are holding you back in your golf game. For example, if you are a slicer and hitting weak left to right shots that don't go very far, you're going to need to find a way to likely do the following 3 things. Reduce the extremity of your swing path, get the club face a little bit more closed at impact, and learn to de-loft the club a bit. A great instructor might be able to get you to do that with 1 or 2 simple adjustments. But the main thing that always has to be your North Star is making sure whether the changes you are making materially improve what's going on at impact and the subsequent ball flight that you're seeing. The great philosopher Rasheed Wallace once said, "Ball don't lie." You can always look to your ball flight for the truth. Don't make a change for aesthetic purposes. It has to be relevant to you. So if you think your swing looks too long and shortening it seems like the right thing to do, that could backfire in a big way. I know because I tried this in my clueless phase. It turned out the length of my swing was not relevant to the faults I had at impact. Additionally, you want to make sure you are physically capable of the new move. Let's say you were getting instruction. You would want to see some evidence fairly quickly that you were actually capable of hitting the position that the coach wanted. That doesn't mean you have to go out on the course and do it immediately, but there should be some evidence that it's possible in the beginning. If there isn't, then it's likely not the right change. The next thing, and I can't stress how important this is since you're watching it on YouTube, is continuity. I know all of you are literally one click away from thousands of videos on the golf swing. Who doesn't want to learn the game-changing secret that'll fix your slice forever in just 20 minutes? In all seriousness, there is plenty of good information on here, but you have to be careful. Your absolute best chance of making this happen is to stick with one voice, in my opinion. I'm not against you watching videos from an instructor if they're helping you, but drinking from the algorithm fire hose is probably gonna undo all of that good work. Now, my preference would be that you get customized help from a swing instructor that knows what they're doing. I know that's not possible for everyone, but if you undergo a big swing change with or without professional help, here are some things you should consider. First, you have to have a reasonable timeline. Swing changes are not going to yield results overnight. You are literally rewiring your brain, and that will take time. How much time? Well, that depends on how big of a change you're making and your physical ability. Minor changes can yield results faster, but of course, this isn't an exact science and everyone's different. Sometimes a golfer just needs a grip change or someone telling them to keep the pressure on their lead side during iron swings, and then they're on their way. You should consider yourself lucky if that's you. But if you do make a big change and you're not seeing evidence of improvement after a few months, then I'd probably say you're not on the right track. Obviously, that sucks if it's happening, but at that point, it might not be worth continuing down that path. It shouldn't take 6 months to a year. I wouldn't want anyone suffering through a swing change that long if I had my way. This all, of course, assumes that you're doing the right work along the way, which I'll explain now. In the beginning stages of a swing change, you need to crawl a bit, so to speak. And here are some examples of what that looks like. Initially, it might make sense to remove the golf ball. You don't want to judge success on ball flight feedback just yet. You can make slow, exaggerated swings in a mirror, or you can video yourself. You're just seeing physical evidence of the changes you are making and what they feel like internally, because sometimes those two things can be entirely different. For example, when I was making my swing change, what felt like a more in to out move coming from the inside wasn't happening yet. But as you get comfortable with these changes, you can start layering on more of a challenge. For some, using a foam golf ball might make sense in the beginning. Or at the driving range, you can make swings feeling like you're moving at 30, 40, and 50% of your normal speed. You are changing a motor pattern, and as I said, rewiring your brain, so you need a lot of repetition to ingrain that new movement. So going slower and exaggerating does help with this process. And this is something you should know about beforehand, because if you don't have the time or the desire to do this, it might not be worth it. This isn't for everyone. So as you get more comfortable with these changes, then you could start swinging more at full speed and eventually start playing with your new swing. But you should expect setbacks. There will be multiple times during your round or practice sessions where you revert back to your older pattern. This is totally normal and to be expected. While it's frustrating, it's just part of the deal. But along the way, when you do make these better swings, you should see improvements in your ball flight. For me, it was hitting that powerful, tight draw rather than that wild, wipey fade. And in those moments, you should be excited because you're on the right track. Overall, you want to have a clear framework of what you're working towards. I can't stress how important this is. Jumping from one thing to the other will not make this process go well, but you can expect your brain to resist these changes at first, and you have to do your best to be patient. I just want to quickly touch on how I feel about video, because I think this topic can be a huge asset for some players and actually the worst thing possible for others. Now, I'm not a huge fan of golfers using video on their swing if they really have no knowledge of how it works. Most are going to start making aesthetic changes that won't contribute to impact changes, and then that kind of sends you on a wild goose chase. The golf swing is incredibly complicated, and as much as I've learned about it, I don't even feel comfortable taking video of my swing because I'm just not confident enough to know the complexities of my matchups. And to be honest, honest, I don't want to know. I'd rather play more intuitively and athletically at this point in my golf life. But if you are working with an instructor, they can show you how to do it properly and, more importantly, give you feedback on what you're looking for in the video. Then it can be a really powerful tool to distinguish between what you feel and what's real. So in other words, leave it to the professional. It takes many years to grasp all these concepts. Now, the next obvious question is, how do you find a good instructor to work with? This isn't always the easiest because there are literally tens of thousands, maybe even more coaches in the world. Of course, you're gonna get a wide variety of communication styles and experience. But the entire process I just walked you through of making the swing change, I think you're gonna have a much better chance of success if you're getting professional guidance along the way. In a perfect world, you would wanna work with someone locally. I still believe that in-person lessons are the best way to go if possible. It's not hard to research local instructors at this point on the internet, and more importantly, learn about their philosophy. You can check out their websites or if they have social media accounts. And of course, word of mouth from some of your golf buddies. If it were me, I would narrow down a list of a few instructors and then talk with them. I'd ask about their philosophy. Are they someone who only wants to teach one version of the swing, which I really don't love? Or are they a coach who's going to work within the framework that suits your physical abilities and matchups? Do they use technology? Personally, I do like instructors that use a diagnostic tool like a launch monitor, camera, or even something like pressure plates. But you also want to make sure that they're not going to overload you too much with that info. You only need to know what they think you should know. Also, you should be really clear about your goals and ask questions about what you can expect from them in terms of practice plans and how often you're going to see them. If you track your stats, this is really helpful information to give them. But most importantly, you want to talk about your ball flight and the patterns that are giving you problems. I don't think you need to see an instructor every week, and this also takes into consideration how much time you have to practice in between lessons. It might make sense to space them out every 2 to 4 weeks so that you can put the work in between. This is absolutely crucial. Overall, you want to feel like their communication style is going to suit you. There's some instructors that might not just be the right fit for you. You can get 10 coaches to look at your swing, and you're likely going to get 10 different explanations of what you need to do. Now, the best one is going to be a combination of what makes sense to you, what will inspire you to actually take action, and of course, what's relevant to your golf swing. If you don't understand something, speak up. You are paying them, and there should be an expectation that you get a clear understanding of what you need to work on. But on top of that, you have a personal responsibility to make sure you're actually doing the work that they prescribe. Don't waste your money if you think you're just going to show up to the lesson and that gets the job done. As I said, you're going to have to do some work in between, like maybe swinging in a mirror at home every night or doing the drills that they hopefully prescribe you at the driving range. This is definitely a two-way street to have success. I've heard some golfers complain that lessons haven't helped them, but sometimes I question, did they put the work in? And lastly, I would commit to a series of lessons. Usually 1 or 2 are not going to get the job done for a serious swing change. So you have to make sure you have the budget and willingness to see this through for several months potentially. I do think that online lessons are still a great option. Skillist is a great platform to find them. I'm friends with many of the instructors on there and they do fantastic work. Another question that always comes up is, when should you make a swing change? Here are some thoughts. If you're a beginner to intermediate golfer, I really don't think there's a bad time to do it. You likely have more to gain than you have to lose, especially if you've never gotten lessons before. But for skilled players, I think timing becomes more important. If you're a golfer who has a typical season, I think starting towards the end of your season is a good idea if possible. This gives you time to work on the changes and try them out on the course, and hopefully you can continue to work on it through the winter. I think trying to do it in season isn't worth it for the better player, especially if you're competing in tournaments. Now, that doesn't mean you can't get a lesson during the season as a bit of a tune-up if something feels off. There's a big difference between that and an overhaul. And all the golfers from warm weather climates, you don't need to fill the comments section with "what off-season" quotes. We all know that there are golfers who play year-round. I wish I was one of them. So let's say you've considered everything I said, and whether it's time, budget, or fear of getting worse, that you just don't want to make this swing change. Now what? How do you get better? Well, I do have some good news for you. There is a type of practice that I've been doing for the last decade that still made me better without getting any swing help. And this is what I refer to as skill-based practice. This is where you're challenging yourself to accomplish different tasks like an athlete and do something called self-organization. This could be working on something like impact location, starting the ball down different target lines, or trying to alter the curvature of your shots. There are so many ways to do this, and the best part is that it doesn't have to come at the expense of your technical work. If anything, it can enhance it. So if you're going at it on your own, I think you're going to see better results this way than watching 20 different swing videos from 20 different instructors. This video has obviously gotten on the longer side, so I'm not going to go into skill-based practice here. But if you want resources on how to practice that way, you can check out the podcast I co-host with Adam Young called The Sweet Spot. Adam wrote a fantastic book called The Practice Manual, which many of you have probably heard of, and you should absolutely check that out. And of course, my book, The 4 Foundations of Golf, has some of these practice methods as well. I'll include links to these in the description. So I've covered a lot. Let me summarize some of the key points for you. Number 1, if you're interested in making a swing change, you have to think critically about what you stand to gain and what you stand to lose. I think this decision is easier for players who are really struggling or kind of newer to the game, but for the better player, this becomes a little riskier. Number 2, make sure whatever changes you're making are actually relevant to your impact conditions and ball flight. Don't make a change just for the aesthetics. Now, sometimes you do get both a prettier golf swing and better impact conditions. Number 3, have continuity. Don't keep switching between videos and instructors. Please stick with one voice and one framework as much as possible. I know this is hard to do. And number 4, be patient and expect this process to take about 1 to 3 months. Expect to go slow at first and then layer on the challenges as you get more comfortable. And lastly, I do think working with a coach makes this process more efficient. Do your best to screen someone who seems like a good fit and commit to a series of lessons. Make sure you hold them accountable to their responsibilities, but don't forget about the work that you need to do. Hopefully this clears things up for you. I know this is a difficult topic, and feel free to ask me questions in the comments section, and I will do my best to answer them. And don't miss my last video where I talk about why 3-woods are the devil.